Happy Tuesday. Welcome to another episode of Let's Start Justice with Jamaicans for Justice. We're certainly happy to be here, and we are excited about another week where our listeners can join us in the conversation. Of course, we're certainly pleased with the listenership. It has been growing. We have been having people WhatsApping us fervently, asking and giving their opinions on things, certainly those on WhatsApp and so on. We are certainly pleased, and again, we're appreciative of your attention to the program. My name is Mikel Jackson, Executive Director of Jamaicans for Justice. Now, Jade Williams, the Policy and Advocacy Specialist who normally co-hosts with the program, she's off for today, so I'll be steering the ship alone, but nevertheless, we push ahead and the show will still go ahead with the usual level of information. For this Tuesday, we are focusing on safety and security in schools, and the week has officially begun for schools. I think last week most schools had focused on orientation, especially at the secondary levels, but now the school week is in full swing, I should say. And I think one of the conversation we have always been concerned about at Jamaicans for Justice, when you look at the high levels of crime and you look at the levels of gang involvement and so on of our youngsters, a lot of scamming, how exactly are we responding to these issues, again, especially at the secondary schools? We're going to be joined by Mr. Richard Troop. He is the Director of Safety and Security in the Ministry of Education. We're also going to be joined a little later on by Mr. Leighton Johnson. He's the President of the Jamaica Teachers Association, newly installed President, I should say. And we're also going to be joined by Mr. Stuart Jacobs, the President of the National Parenting Teachers Association of Jamaica. But before we get into the topic in a few minutes, there were several things that happened in the news cycle, and some of them we're going to be speaking about in the second half of the program. For example, the conversation around the Haitians coming into the country seeking refuge, because we're aware of the turmoil that is in Haiti, our neighbor, our CARICOM member. So it's something that I want us to really talk about briefly in the second half of the program. If you remember as well, we also had the Permanent Secretary, Mr. Wayne Robertson, who had joined us discussing constitutional reform and encouraging you all to be a part of the process. He provided some updates that was promised when some questions were asked by those who follow us on social media. So I will share those updates, and the team will put that on the Twitter and the Instagram page before the day ends. And we're also going to be discussing what is happening in the political landscape, not from a politics perspective, because we're a human rights organization, but certainly the role of the political ombudsman and the fact that Jamaicans for Justice, National Integrity Action, and several other civil society organizations and advocates have raised some concerns in the past in terms of the role of the political ombudsman and where exactly is the promise of that office being integrated into the Electoral Commission of Jamaica. So we have those conversations coming up. But before we get into it, last week the nation had on full blast, going into yesterday morning, the matter of the dunce bag. And the bag that was branded dunce, apparently it's based on a popular song that an artist, my son, had been listening to the song for a few minutes. Valiant, I think his name is. I stand corrected. But I won't comment on the song, but I would comment on the reaction from several school principals, wherein, unsurprisingly, the reaction was to ban the bag. And one can understand, certainly, that as a society, there must be values and norms that we adhere to and standards that we set. So it wasn't the banning of the bags for us as the concern, but it's the implication of the banning of the bags and what that means for children having access to school. One principal initially said that if a child shows up with a bag that is branded dunce, that child will be barred from entering the school compound. And that is very problematic for us. Even in an instance where a child is barred from class, that is also problematic. I think one must examine, firstly, if a child is banned from entering the school grounds, how exactly are we putting that child at risk? Again, when we look at the high levels of crime, because we're all concerned about that. What happens? How do we deal with it? If a child, for example, is asked to go back home and something happens to that child on their way back home. The second part of it, this bag, no matter how our thought is about it, is barring a child from class the immediate response. Especially when we look at some of the broader issues at play. For example, when you look at the numeracy and literacy rates in schools, the fact that several of our youngsters are matriculating without the necessary skill sets to deal with the issues. So I want to make it absolutely clear, because JFJ, we have been in the media speaking on the issue. We are not saying that principals and wider society should not stand for something. We're saying, when we're standing, what exactly are we calling for? How exactly are we dealing with the real issues affecting society that may make a child want to wear that bag in the first place? That may make a parent want to buy that bag in the first place? And what we have said very clearly is that rather than deal with the challenges as they go along, or as they pop up, as they arise, maybe we should be looking at those life skills empowerment session where a child can be forward thinking. A child can see that this is what I want to be in society. This is what I want to stand for. And I think perhaps if we focus on life skills and empowerment, I think we will see greater levels of changes in society. So you don't have to be looking at these things as they arise. All right? I think that's the key point that JFJ is making here. And I also want to point out as well that we have been consistent in our call that parents ought to be involved a little bit more. And I don't want the burden to necessarily be on the schools, but I do think there has to be a place, and I hope to have the National Parenting Commission on the program shortly, where which state agency would be responsible for engaging parents so that we can have some of these training engagements. Again, especially when you look at the fact that children are having children. So it's a broader societal issue, is the point that JFJ is making. But I think barring children from entering schools cannot be the answer. And quite frankly, school administrators, you may actually be in violation of the Child Care and Protection Act. So I would urge you to tread with caution. Yeah? Now, our right of the day, or the did you know of the day as we push along. My eyesight is not as good as Jade's. Were she here, she would read it easily, so I may be straining a little bit. But interestingly, the right of the day, it's converted to a did you know, and it focuses on Section 28 of the Child Care and Protection Act. And it speaks to the duty to secure education of a child. A timely did you know, where every person having the custody, charge, or care for a child between the ages of 4 and 16 years shall take such steps to ensure that the child is enrolled and attends schools. You hear that? Once you have a child within your care, it is your responsibility to ensure that that child between the ages of 4 and 16 years old enrolls and attend school. But importantly, if it is that you have some difficulty in providing that financial support for your child to go to school, then it is that you shall apply to the minister in a prescribed matter for some financial assistance. I think that is what is being said here. Where a person having the custody, charge, or care for a child is financially unable to provide the child with any article required for the purposes of the child's education at a school, the person should apply to the minister in a prescribed manner for assistance. And that is under Section 28 of the Child Care and Protection Act. And there is a trivia that will see persons getting credit again. Which year was the first edition of the Safety and Security Policy Guidelines published? So let me repeat. Which year was the first edition of the Safety and Security Policy Guidelines published? So that is our trivia for today. Now, to get into the meat of the matter, our discussion on safety and security in schools. Now, in November of last year, the Police Commissioner, Major General Anthony Anderson, revealed that some 875 major crimes committed in Jamaica between 2019 and 2022 were committed by perpetrators between ages 15 and 17. And this is against the background where you have frequent reports of teachers and students or students in altercations in schools. I think one of those situations, you actually had a teenage girl that killed another child when they were fighting. So when you look at the backdrop of all of these things, and again, our children being involved in crime, a lot of scamming, first generation gangs, for example, several reports of children being found with illegal possession of firearm or possession of an illegal firearm, then it begs the question, what exactly is happening in our schools and how can we respond to the problem? We're joined by Mr. Richard Troop, the Director of Safety and Security in Schools, Mr. Leighton Johnson, President, Jamaica Teachers Association, and Mr. Stuart Jacobs, the President of the National Parent Teachers Association. Do we have all three gentlemen on the call? Mr. Troop is on?
Good afternoon. Yes, I am.
Good afternoon, Mr. Troop. How are you?
I am good, ma'am.
Thank you so much for joining JFJ's Let's Start Justice program. If you could just paint a picture for us before we start, what are some of the challenges that perhaps you're aware of that the ministry has flagged as a cause for concern when we look at security issues in our schools?
I like the look of terror in your eyes.
I want to thank you very much for inviting me to speak this afternoon to you and your listeners. And the Ministry of Education, like all well-concerned Jamaicans, I think some of the issues concerning the safety and security of our nation's schools. When schools are located in communities that experience significant violence, crime and violence, there's a tendency for that violence to spill over into communities. So that is perhaps one of our number one concern. The violence in communities, and there are many communities across the length and breadth of this country that are experiencing serious and unprecedented levels of violence. And we are suggesting when communities are in conflict, when groups in communities are in conflict, there's a tendency for this to spill over into our communities. The violence in our communities and the violence that have been impacting our families have created significant traumatic experiences for our boys and girls. They often take these traumatic experiences to schools. When these traumatic experiences are unresolved, when they are not treated with, there's a tendency for our children to
his best friend, his sister,
be in our schools, have a tendency to resort in to violent activity, to treat with their own personal challenges.
Yes.
We have to recognize, again, a reflection of our society. In our society, we just don't know how to manage conflicts. And so while conflicts will always be a part of us once we are alive, the fact that we are unable to resolve conflict peacefully would often contribute to the instances of violence.
Right.
We're also seeing, and I would use this as my last point,
Yes.
we're also seeing a number of our boys and girls, a significant percentage of our boys and girls would have expressed serious concerns about their safety as they traverse our nation's street to get to and from school. The fear of being attacked, the fear of being robbed, the fear of being sexually exploited or harassed would have often caused our boys and girls to arm themselves as a way of protecting self and property.
Hold that thought for me, Mr. Troop. We have to take the break now, please.
You think
Listen up, Jamaica. At Fosrich, everybody's getting a solar water heater. $20,000 deposit. 6 months to pay. What a deal! Fosrich Financing. Call us 876-937-5099.
This hurricane tip is brought to you by Guardian General Insurance Jamaica Limited. Live safe, live easy. Contact us at 876-926-3720 or visit us at www.myggonline and get a free quote today. Are you ready for this hurricane season? Here are a few tips to remind you on how best to prepare for a storm. Store extra food of 4 to 5 days, especially things that can be eaten without cooking or that would need very little preparation. Remember, the electricity may be off during the hurricane, leaving you without refrigeration. This hurricane tip is brought to you by Guardian General Insurance Jamaica Limited. Live safe, live easy.
Yeah, that's the name of my student, and I represent for which FM? Bridge FM, really rich FM. The people's champion. Our missions, our visions.
Welcome back to Let's Start Justice. You realize I'm anchoring the program alone this week, but we push ahead just the same. We're discussing safety and security in our schools, and we're joined by Mr. Richard Troop from the Ministry of Education. He's the director of the Safety and Security in Schools program. We're also joined by the president of the Jamaica Teachers Association. That's Mr. Leighton Johnson. I think we're still trying to get Mr. Stuart Jacobs from the National Parenting Association. He's online now? All right, perfect. We heard from Mr. Troop earlier, but let us segue to Mr. Leighton Johnson to get a sense, Mr. Johnson, from your end. What exactly is the concern of our teachers when we talk about safety and security in schools?
All right, good afternoon to you and your listeners. Good afternoon, Mr. Troop. Good afternoon to Mr. Stewart, who is perhaps on. Safety and security is a major concern for our educators, for our teachers. And I listened in as Mr. Troop outlined many of the concerns that were raised. And these are concerns that have been raised by our teachers and students right across the board. I can state categorically that there are students who are afraid in many instances in how they traverse the school, in how they commute to school. There are students who have to wake up extremely early, and for those who are on the shift system, you know, a shift school starts at 7 o'clock. So those students who travel perhaps across a parish or 2 or 3 parishes to get to school, they will have to be awake very early, and they are on the roads from very early, even before any other school. Again, speaking from an administrative perspective, at the Mushet High School, we have had to deal with the situation where a young lady was murdered whilst on her way to school very early one morning. So it is a real concern. There are concerns about gangs, the establishment of gangs in schools. There are gangsters within violent-prone communities that have established cells within schools. And the teachers and students are aware of these individuals. And in some regard, you know, they are very afraid. They are apprehensive in administering any form of discipline to these students. And students are afraid of being in their company. Simply because of the association that these students bring.
And the schools with these types of gang involvement, what's the ratio between the rural and the urban dimension?
I can't say there is a ratio. What I can indicate is that you'll find these schools or these situations in schools that are situated in violent-prone communities, and perhaps in just about schools right across the nation. you'll find students who are affiliated to different gangs, or those who are establishing themselves as gangsters right across the board. As administrators, we have to be firm. We have to take a no-nonsense approach, and we have to have a very close relationship with our security forces to deal with these issues. But then school safety and security also moves further into other dimensions. We speak about infrastructure. How safe is the infrastructure? How safe is the surrounding of the school? The Ministry of Education has admitted that there are schools that have infrastructure that need upgrading. Schools have indicated that students have received electric shocks because of how the electric infrastructure, how outdated it is, and how exposed it is for students and the teachers. We've had situations where teachers have fallen through the floors of schools. And of course, just the other day, a school in Montego Bay is continuing to lament the roof, how deplorable the roof is. And we've had situations where rafters have fallen in classrooms. However, there were no injuries, and we thank God for that.
Yes.
But when you speak about school safety and security, it is all encompassing. How safe the infrastructure is, how secure the perimeter of the school is, what are the procedures that are in place when we speak to emergencies, disasters, fires, earthquakes. These are the things that we speak to when we talk about school safety and the security. Do schools have the necessary protocols in place? Do they have the fire brigade number on an emergency contact? Is there a panic button to go directly to the police station that is close to the school? Are there security officers or resource officers within the school that can get to the police in quick succession in the event that there is the need for this?
Just to bring in Mr. Jacobs, but thanks for that perspective, Mr. Johnson, because I think sometimes when we talk about safety and security, we were looking at it in the framework of the crime and the violence parameters, but I'm happy that you really spoke about it from an occupational health perspective. Very, very good.
That is something that we have to focus on.
Yes.
It is something that we really have to focus on.
All right. Thanks for that. Mr. Stuart Jacobs, thank you so much for joining. We certainly appreciate it. From your perspective, representing the parents, the Parents Association, what is the immediate concern around parental involvement and just the parents' perspective on the issue?
To your listeners once again, and to the other panelists. Teachers and students spend more time at school than they do at home. They also spend more alert and attentive time during those hours at school. And so that surrounding has to be as comfortable, as sound, as protected and safe, not only to sustain life and not to maim life, but also to create that conducive, comforting atmosphere for learning. You want to optimize those hours. And so safety here and security comes with all these amenities, want of amenities. But there is what faces us.
I think we're having some problems hearing Mr. Jacobs. The background seems a little bit off. Is that a technical issue? Yes, much better.
Okay, and so one of the things that we look at for safety and security is the current heat, the high temperatures that we have been observing. That is a part of our concern also, because the constant drain of energy while sitting in those classrooms or standing on the corridors. There needs to be further ventilation of some of the classrooms. Then there is the migration.
Yes, the call with Mr. Jacobs, it isn't working. I'm not sure if the technical operator, if we could try and rectify the problem so we can hear more of Mr. Jacobs' perspective. All right. So I'm just going to segue and go back to you, Mr. Troop. Mr. Troop?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, thank you so much. We've heard some of the issues that Mr. Jacobs was even outlining about the heat. We heard from Mr. Johnson indicating that outside of the security issue within the context of the high levels of violence, and you also mentioned it, that is perhaps reflective of what is happening in the wider society. We heard about those occupational health and safety concerns, perhaps you have something broken, the infrastructural issues. From your perspective, based on what you're able to speak on, what exactly is the Ministry of Education's response?
I think our Ministry of Education has been very consistent on the different perspectives of issues relating to safety and security. As a Ministry of Education, we encourage our schools to assume, some amount of responsibility in terms of treating with issues within local context. Because of that, we have always said to our schools, it's important to establish your safety and security committees. It's important you conduct your safety and security audits. It is important that you develop a safety and security plan. And it's important that you implement those plans to treat with the issues at the local level. As a Ministry of Education, we have also developed many times in a proactive way critical bulletins to guide the system. And so a couple of days ago, we would have created a bulletin to treat with the high level of temperature that our country is feeling and the world is experiencing right now. And what is it that we can do at the local school level to mitigate against those issues? So we do understand that the issues of safety and security requires not just a ministry response, but all our stakeholders working together. And so I'm happy of the three different levels of stakeholders represented on this call and the consistency of our message. And it is going to require our continued partnership to address these issues. Now, truth be told, many of our schools were built decades ago,
yes,
and they were not built in the context of the level of vulnerabilities that they are exposed to now. There was a time when it was natural for many of our schools to be built without a perimeter fence. We do not recognize now that in the context of the vulnerability of safety and security of our stakeholders within school, the issue of fence becomes an important need. We want to also celebrate the fact that many of our schools are not waiting on our Ministry of Education to respond. We have seen so many instances of school leaders and stakeholders within the education system working together to resolve the issues at the local level. So, for example, many schools, without the resources of the ministry, would have invested in CCTV surveillance system to provide greater level of coverage for the schools. Many schools would have developed strategic partnership with local stakeholder groups within communities or civil society organizations to treat with some of the vulnerabilities in their space. So we see many schools would have reached out to organizations like the National Council for Drug Abuse to treat with issues of substance misuse in schools. We encourage these levels of proactivity. We encourage these levels of collaboration within and with our external partners, because it is going to take the collective effort of all of us working together to resolve many of the vulnerabilities. I want to also make a plug-in
Mr. Troop, pause that for me. Hold that thought. Yeah. We have to take the break, but Mr. Jacobs is now online. So when we return, we need to pick up with Mr. Jacob as well. So we take the break, and I'm going to ask the gentleman to stay with us for another 10 or so minutes.
Hungry for deals? Get the famous bowl combo from KFC. Available for just $590. KFC, it's finger licking good.
The time by KFC is
29 minutes going up to 2 o'clock.
Jamaica! Are you ready for the ultimate getaway? Look no further than Iberostar Rose Hall Beach, nestled in the breathtaking second city of Montego Bay, an all-inclusive paradise where families, friends, and groups can create unforgettable memories. Book your stay today and experience the perfect getaway. Visit our website at Iberostar.com. Your passport to paradise. Terms and conditions apply, subject to availability.
KFC, taste so good with the price we love. With the famous ball KFC, we are gone. So delicious, what a good deal this. I'm satisfied, I'm a bucket now famous ball. Best tasting food for your money. So delicious, everybody love it. With the chicken, corn, mashed potatoes, melted cheese and gravy.
Hungry for deals? Get the famous bowl combo from KFC. Creamy mashed potato, delicious chicken, melted cheese, corn, and gravy, plus a Pepsi for just $590. Also available in barbecue. KFC, it's finger licking good.
Your world station, The Bridge 99.
The people's champion. Our mission is love. Our vision is love. Jamaicans, by justice. The people's champion. Justice, justice for all. Justice under law. Justice, Jamaica demand. Right to life, right to liberty. Justice, justice for all.
Welcome back to Let's Start Justice. We're still discussing the topic of safety and security in our schools. Mr. Jacobs, still with us?
Yes, I'm here.
Thank you so much. We're hearing you clearly. All right. Go ahead with your perspective, but I also want to hear the views of the parents, and because we're going to be focusing more on recommendations and things that we want to see changed, if you could also speak about recommendations from the parents' perspective.
Sure. First, let me say good afternoon again to your listeners and to my good friend, Dr. Troop. I didn't realize he was on. I heard his passion just now. Always passionate about the education system. The parents' perspective on security and safety in school is in 3 dimensions. One, the infrastructure. That there's nothing protruding that is going to harm the child. That's one. Secondly, that the criminal elements that exist in our society is migrated within the walls of our schools, because gangs are migratory and they do find themselves in schools where they start to recruit and all of that and play out themselves there. And the second part of our concerns with the third part of safety and security in schools is transportation. The to and from school is a challenge also, because the child is now open and vulnerable to all of this. And so let me start with the solution, with the latter, is to introduce as best and to implement as best a transportation system that is solely designed exclusively for children.
Yes.
Where music, entertainment that is played on it, you hear ABC 1, 2, 3, something coming from your curriculum what you learned today. You're not hearing anything about to be done on it. And that there's a particular way in which so the same atmosphere that is in the classroom is transported on the transportation that is taking our children home. They are not mixed with the general population. We know it's expensive, and when you listen to a lot of PTAs, they are willing to pay the extra that their little Mary or their little Johnny can reach home earlier, safer, and less haggard. less fatigue because they have to be traveling with adults who care no less about pushing them aside. The other part of the spectrum here in terms of security is the gangs in schools. Is to have more education. I know the Ministry of Education has done a fantastic job of conflict resolution in collaboration with other entities. They have done a fantastic job where kids are now learning to reason things out. But we want to see more of it, and so the PTAs are willing to be a part of that process. Because active, effective PTAs becomes the extended village. You become extended village. You no longer look at this child in the school as being only your child, but you look at all the kids in her class or his class or the entire block. You adopt them in some way, shape or form. And then the infrastructural side is, Dr. Troop spoke about it. The government, the ministry has a safety and security department, division that goes around and ensures that these infrastructures are in place. That it may also be shared. When it is being done, you're the engineer, fine, because the structural engineers are going to come in, but have a member of the PTA, a member of the staff, a member of the ancillary to walk with this engineer and say, look, this is compromised, this is not compromised, this is what we do. And believe it or not, this is where the PTA will come in and say, look, we are going to put on a razor to fix this column. Mr. Engineer, how much is it going to cost?
But Mr. Jacobs, as much as how that sounds like a fabulous idea, what does it speak to when you look at the financial capabilities of our parents? Are we being very idealistic and not focusing on the reality that where parents perhaps would want to support, they're simply not in the position to do so?
They're not going to do 100%, but they're going to contribute to it. So if it's 100,000, the PTA can only give 10,000. That's it.
Okay.
But at least what the institution will see is that effort, and then collectively, you have the alumni will come in, community will come in, sponsors will come in, but let it begin with me, and that is what the PTA is saying. We want it to begin with us, the fixing of the security and safety of our children in school.
Thank you. So I want to play a clip before going back to Mr. Johnson and then just doing the rounds as we close out. The Minister of Education, the Honourable Favour Williams, had indicated that there is an end violence campaign that was launched, and there is the aim to reduce by 50%, I believe, the levels of violence in schools by November 2023. Can we just have the clip played?
Year-long campaign that was launched in the context of frequent flare-up of violence among children in schools, sometimes, as you all know, with tragic and fatal results. This campaign will bring all our safety and security programs and initiatives together to form a cohesive and a comprehensive program.
But we push ahead. The minister was speaking about some of the proposals, for example, the CCTV cameras in schools, more resources, restorative justice programs. And I quite like the partnership with the Ministry of Justice, because that restorative justice program, and I think, is something to be lauded. So, Mr. Johnson, if you could just close out with your comment in terms of what the ministry is doing, what more can be done and should be done as we try to tackle the issue of safety and security in our schools.
All right. So, of course, indeed, we appreciate and laud the efforts through the restorative justice program that has been launched within our schools. It's an initiative that schools have been utilizing, and they are or have reported that there is some degree of success to the utilization of the skills learned through restorative justice. Of course, in terms of the other initiatives that have been promoted through the Ministry of Education, schools will continue as best to implement these programs with a view of ensuring that our spaces are environmentally friendly, our spaces are free and non-threatening, and of course we continue to teach conflict resolutions within our schools. We want to ensure too that we continue to partner with the various entities to implement CCTV cameras right across our schools. Of course, many schools have already implemented these pieces of technological infrastructure to bolster the safety mechanisms within our schools. And we call for greater partnership with corporate Jamaica to adopt schools where this is concerned. We would also want to broaden the whole matter of the deans of disciplines in schools for this system to be implemented within our primary schools. You know, many of the primary schools have also indicated that they have challenges with student discipline, and with the insertion of a dean of discipline in these schools, then this can assist in alleviating some of the challenges that our schools face. And of course, we want to continue to call for the implementation of additional resource officers in our schools, especially our schools that are violent prone. We need resource officers to be implemented or stationed within these schools.
Right. Another 5 seconds, Mr. Johnson.
Yeah, we fully endorse the whole matter of the school bus system. Many schools across Jamaica, through the Parent Teachers Association, have embarked on their private partnerships and initiatives. And of course, the ministry had piloted the school bus program right across in some areas of Jamaica. This is something we believe needs to be implemented on a holistic basis right across our country.
All right, thank you so much. A minute for you, Mr. Jacobs, and then we will ask Mr. Troop to close out with his comment.
Mine is very short, non-toxic. That's what we ask of our schools. Non-toxic in all facets, all degrees. That's what we ask for. Clear, clean, conducive, all for learning environment. And together we can do it.
All right, great. Mr. Troop, last word for you. We still have Mr. Troop on?
Yeah, I'm here. Oh, gee, I was muted. Yeah, I was just making the point, my sister. Very encouraged by my colleagues online who have, just articulated the efforts of the ministry to respond to the issue of safety and security in our nation's schools. I'm very encouraged by those commendations. We cannot, though, drop our guards. We have to continue to redouble our efforts. We did a safety and security perception survey in 331 schools a few months ago. And the survey findings would have raised the issue of bullying in schools. It is a major cause for concern. We will have to continue to work with our boys and girls to ensure that they are equipped with the necessary skills to treat with the issue of bullying. And schools need to be responsive to these realities. We will continue to give targeted attention to issues of violence and issues of safety and security in our schools. I'm happy we are recognizing that this is not a 9-day wonder. Our Honorable Minister would have articulated a commitment to provide CCTV surveillance system in all public schools. We have done an audit in 652 of our 1,010 public schools. We have a preliminary costing of what that would require in terms of budgetary support. And we're in the process of working through that now. But in the meantime, colleagues, we ask for your continued support. We ask too that we embrace a spirit of celebrating what we have been doing in our nation's schools to make our boys and girls and teachers safe. I want to commend our educators and stakeholders in the system because they have been doing significant work to create that safe and enabling environment for teaching and learning. And together, we will continue to make progress in this regard.
Perfectly said. Thank you so much to all three gentlemen for joining. It's a conversation I think is worth, continuing to be had. And certainly there are other areas that we could have spoken of some more. But again, Mr. Richard Troop, Director of Safety and Security in Schools at the Ministry of Education, Mr. Leighton Johnson, President of the Jamaica Teachers Association, and Mr. Stuart Jacobs, the President of the National Parent Teachers Association of Jamaica. Thank you so much for joining. We appreciate you. I think we're due a break at this point. All right, we take the break.
Right.
Introducing the Bridge 99 FM Dance Hall Chart Show.
I are the one and they are what?
All about our weekly top 10 music countdown, our Bridge Spotlight featuring artists and music producers, and our chat with the Bridge Jocks and music director.
We bring you in on the action. Just send your videos every week for your favorite artists on the chart in our Fan Affair segment. Do it WhatsApp 876-551-5782.
Jogger! It's new, it's authentic, it's trend setting, and only on the Bridge 99 FM Dance Hall Chart Show, hosted by Shell.
You know the vibes this Friday at 1 p.m. at the wickedest thing since dancehall. You know the thing go, we're bringing the vibes to the where, to the what, to the world.
The beautiful game.
There's a chance for a woman. Oh, they've scored! I do not believe what I've just seen.
Football's finest.
He scored! Oh, Troy Deeney has scored!
Game time, powered by AnyBet.
El Capitano! El Capitano!
Fridays, 12 noon to 1 p.m.
Alexis at the back post, but
discussions, analysis, predictions, and odds that make you the winner.
Again!
Only on the Bridge 99 FM.
Whatever you need, a fireman! Messi's the man to call!
AnyBet, your best bet.
Hi, this is Butcher Bennington. You're tuned to Bridge 99 FM, taking the music from the Caribbean all the way to the diaspora globally.
The deepest champion. Our mission is love. Our vision is love. Jamaicans by justice. The deepest champion. Justice for all. Justice under law. Justice. Jamaica demand. Right to life, right to liberty.
Welcome back to Let's Start Justice. We just had a very good conversation about safety and security in schools. And I liked how the conversation really spoke to the broader issues, because I think, again, when we think about safety and security, we tend to put it within the context only of violence. But when you look at some of the infrastructure, when these schools were being built, or when they were built rather, and what exactly we need to improve upon, furniture in the classrooms and ensuring that the environment for our children, it is conducive to learning. And of course, our educators must feel safe in the process. We heard the calls, for example, for more resource officers, more deans of discipline, more guidance counselors to really be dealing with the psychosocial challenges that our children face. Before I move on, though, there was something I found interesting last week listening to the news cycle. We have heard before, and this is something that came up in the 1990s as well, from a former Prime Minister, P.J. Patterson, and it's a call that our current Prime Minister, the Most Honourable Andrew Holness, is signalling will be done, attitudes and values in our schools. And he he made that call within the context of the broader societal issues. And we know that we have a committee of sorts dealing with the violence in schools problem, looking at the root causes. And we heard from Professor Maureen Sams Vaughan, about some of the issues facing our children. For example, the levels of domestic violence in the homes, mommy and daddy fighting, using language around our children that ought not to be, how we discipline our child. Quite frankly, it's not discipline, it's physical abuse, corporal punishment in the homes. And, how are we dealing with those issues? The fact that our children, they're also subjected to sexual exploitation in the household, in the communities. So there are so many underlying issues that affect our children. And when we send them off to school, how do those issues manifest in their behavior? So it's a conversation worth pursuing as we move forward. Now, there were two other issues I wanted to flag. Over the weekend, it came to light that 36 Haitians landed on our shores. Less than 24 hours, apparently, these 36 individuals who are fleeing a country that is riddled with political instability, violence, and a state unable to take care of its citizens, sought refuge to Jamaica. Melania Lane from Freedom Imaginaries, who has been championing and supporting this particular cause, stated on a radio program, I think it was nationwide, I heard it on, where she indicated that when she went to Robbins Bay in St. Mary, she was told, and she asked to speak to have access to the 36 Haitians. She was told that they had already left the island. Subsequent reports and confirmation from the Minister of Information, the Honorable Robert Nestor Morgan, indicated that the government provided safe passage back to Haiti. Now, what is concerning for us, one, how it was done, and secondly, in answering how it was done, one ponders and questions the narrative that apparently the Haitians wanted to go back. And it brings into question whether or not Jamaica is adhering to international conventions to which it is a signatory, wherein we have basically denied entry to people who are fleeing again a country, and they're asked to go back, forced to go back, where they may face persecution. And we rightfully had Freedom Imaginaries and Stand Up for Jamaica condemning the action of the government. I believe Stand Up for Jamaica, Carla Gulato, its executive director, called the action reprehensible. And JFJ stands behind and makes similar calls. What is also interesting and disappointing, if one may say this, that the 37 Haitians who had landed in July 10th to be exact, and had sought refuge, also being represented or is being represented by Melania Lane, and I think she has some other attorneys, including Mr. Hugh Small. Though they have made the application for asylum, the government has not been forthcoming. They have not been responsive in providing update. And we're saying to the government of Jamaica that a transparent government must communicate with individuals, provide timely updates, but certainly to the lawyers who are providing assistance to these individuals. It enhances trust in the system for such engagement to take place, especially reasonable asks that are being made. The last thing I want to point out is that, notwithstanding the statement by the Prime Minister that an election perhaps may not be near, We certainly have persons on the political platforms making statements energizing and electrifying according to what the General Secretary of the People's National Party stated. Why is this a cause for JFJ? We have heard statements on the political platform that may energize supporters a little bit too much, to the point where they may act in a way that is not in keeping with the law and may put others at harm. And when you have an election that may undermine other aspects of society, or acts that may undermine other aspects of society, then it undermines the fundamental governance of the country. And it's on that basis that JFJ reiterates its call for the office of the political ombudsman to be reinstated. We say this again, that the government of Jamaica ought not to have used its executive branch to end the body that reports to Parliament. You would have undermined the legislator by making such decision unilaterally. And it's important that that body be reinstated. I want to be very clear that even with the gaps with the Office of the Political Ombudsman, for example, when you look at Section 22 of that act, which is an interim act, I think the fines that the political ombudsman could impose is perhaps $50,000 or 6 months imprisonment or both. So quite frankly, the accountability system within the political ombudsman needs improvement. Nevertheless, we call for the body to be reinstated until the government of Jamaica makes the necessary provisions for the Electoral Commission of Jamaica to have such powers. The last update I want to provide before I close out is that we heard from Mr. Wayne Roberts, and I said it at the start, and we're going to be updating our Twitter accounts and our Instagram, where Mr. Robinson had indicated, and he provides some link to the live streaming that was done by those who had presented before the Constitutional Reform Committee, the NDM, Cafe, Jambar, and so on. But he also answered a question to indicate that a final decision regarding the streaming of the CRC meetings itself will be made in short order. So we can't tell you that the streaming will be there as yet because the CRC has not yet made such decision. And the outstanding minutes he noted will be posted on the websites of the Ministry of Legal and Constitutional Affairs within another 2 weeks. So that is an update that is important to note. No, Jade is not here, so the excitement around the trivia, just bear with my voice. We have 2 winners, and I don't understand, but anyway, because I need to check those seconds to see who posts the answers first. But Vanessa is saying that we have 2 winners, one on Instagram, that's in Dax We Trust. The correct answer is 2008. And just to remind the listeners quickly before I have to go, the question asked, what year was the first edition of the Safety and Security Policy Guidelines? 2008 is the answer. And we had Nordia on YouTube answering first. All right, so that is it for today's Let's Start Justice. We again extend our appreciation to those who continue to tune in. We love the listeners. And the last thing, I have 7 more seconds, so I can quickly plug this. Over the weekend, we engaged 19 human rights champions, young people, and so on across various capacities, and they were awesome. So I just want to say big up on yourself. I'm the Executive Director, Michael Jackson of Jamaicans for Justice. Thank you so much.
Justice, the people's champion. Justice, justice for all. Justice under law. Justice, Jamaica demand. Right to life, right to liberty. Out of many we are one in a Jamaica. Jamaica, make it a better place for the boys and girls. Created equal by the creator. For equal rights and opportunities. No to unlawful detention. And police brutalization. Class, gender, race or religion. We not tolerate discrimination.
To join the fight against injustice, contact us at 755-4524 or Jamaicans4Justice.org.
The people's champion.
KFC, tastes so good with the price we love. With the famous ball KFC, we are gone. So delicious, what a good deal this. I'm satisfied, I'm a